Yeah, I just have a question, and I'm wondering, I'm hoping it's not like a silly question, but do certain types of food scraps carry a specific type of like microbe that would help correct an issue like faster than others? Like I'm wondering if like bread waste with like yeast would help correct odor more than like adding vegetables and food scraps. Does that make sense?
I think that would be amazing research. We know that a diversity of materials brings in a diversity of organisms, but we don't know yet really which organisms come with which materials, with some differences. We know that food scraps come with a lot of bacteria. Grasses might come in with a lot more protozoa, and first cut grasses especially. So I think we have a lot to learn there. And I love the question. I wonder if my colleagues have any good answers there.
I think the best thing, Paige, is a balance of your food scraps, because we do know that meat has different microorganisms that come with it, and that's why it's slower to decompose. And also, it's just what meat is composed with. And then what I have found in school composting, because they are so heavy on starches and bread and pizza crust, that it is actually a little slower to compost because it's not got the higher nitrogen that you would have with vegetables. And so that's what the organisms like to eat more, because its nitrogen breaks down more readily, it's wetter, it's a lot easier for them to digest, and they get more energy out of that kind of substance as opposed to the bread. So I think a diversity of food scraps, in my experiences, has been the best.
Yeah,
and then
and I'll just
your carbon.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. Anytime you have like an overabundance of one thing, you're going to have to adjust your recipe to account for that. So like Athena was saying, and I see the same thing with schools, like if it's like a ton of pasta and bread and kind of drier food scraps, you really have to watch your moisture. Similarly, if you do a ton of canning of tomatoes and you put all that kind of slop in your compost, let me tell you, that is like a ton all at once potentially that you're inputting into that system, and you have to adjust for it. I am lucky enough to have a father-in-law who sends us citrus every winter as our Christmas present. And my compost always gets a little funky because it doesn't last so long. And so within 2 weeks, my husband and I eat like a ton of grapefruits and oranges. And I put all of those peels into the compost, and it self-corrects. Like compost, like Kat said, is a very forgiving system given a little bit of time and some nudging in the right direction. But, you know, I've definitely noticed like my compost smells a little different. It looks a little different when I've just dumped, 48 citrus peels into it within a short period of time. And that's not to say, and that's what I have, and that's how I manage my food waste, and that's totally fine. But I know that, and I kind of look out for that. And so that's just something to keep in mind. But in terms of Paige, I love your question too, but you had asked sort of about controlling odors. Really what I have found, and there's a ton we don't know, but like you need to get dry carbon on a pile if you're having an odor issue and you're trying to control that. And really, to some extent, it may be more if it's leaves and a little less if it's wood shavings, but you need to get carbon into that system. And that's sort of like the troubleshooting end game, is if something is happening with your system and it is funky and you don't know what to do, bury it in carbon. It's kind of like putting the brakes on. Everything's kind of slowed down. It might cool off and get slower, and just like kind of like hit the pause button and get in touch with one of us for some troubleshooting help or a site visit, depending on what's going on. That seems extreme, but especially I have to say, working with some school systems, I have seen some pretty extreme things where really you want to just bury it in carbon and remix and kind of like reset, regroup. I don't think any of you are going to get to that point, but just so you know, like even if you really go off the deep end in that extreme, you can recover from it, and we can help you figure out what to add in and what how to move on from wherever you've gone. And so there are no silly questions, and there is definitely no huge catastrophic mistakes in composting. It's all just learning and observing and figuring out what next steps to take to move your process forward.